led you to develop the breathing technique, and how did it make you feel?
It's a great question. So I did not develop any breathing techniques. As a journalist, I went out into the field and talked with experts, breathing therapists, people who have been studying breathing for decades and decades. And I spent several years collecting what we know about the new science of breathing. And what I learned is that so many of us are breathing improperly. Yes, you can breathe inadequately. You can breathe improperly, just like how you can eat the wrong foods or not exercise enough. And how we breathe affects us in so many ways. It affects how we think. It affects how we move. It can even affect our growth. How you breathe can affect your growth, which is amazing stuff. So it turns out that our ancestors were likely breathing a lot better than we are today. And I know that seems crazy, because how can we prove that? We can't take an ancient ancestor and put them into a lab, but we can look at their skeletons. And by looking at their skeletons, by looking at their jaw structure, we can see that their airways were much more wide than ours are now. If you think about the modern population, most of us have crooked teeth. We have crooked teeth because our mouths have grown so small. And with a mouth that's too small, you have a smaller airway, which leads to a lot of breathing problems. So I know that wasn't the exact answer you were looking for, but there are as many different ways to breathe as there are foods to eat. And we can use these different ways to breathe to really energize our body or put ourselves to sleep or focus. There's so many things we can do with just our breath.
James, thanks for answering that question, certainly. And you talked a bit about what you've researched on there. Just give us a bit of insight now to the people watching on where did it come from to suddenly look at breathing as an idea? It's something we don't even think about most of our times. So I'm thinking here, I'm now more aware suddenly by what you said of how I'm breathing, whereas a second ago I wasn't. So what triggered it off for you in terms of your journey?
Well, a lot of my friends, when I told them I was going to go write a book about breathing, they thought, this is the stupidest book in the world. We all breathe. I'm breathing now. You're breathing. Everyone who is alive is breathing. What do we really need to know about it? But it wasn't really until I showed them what free divers were able to do that they got interested. And this was really my jumping off point as well. So free divers are these people who have trained themselves to hold their breath for 7, 8, 9 minutes at a time and dive to depths of 300 or 400 feet, 100 meters below that. So they're able to do this because they focused on this art of breathing. And what they told me was that to focus on your breathing not only allows you to dive very deep for very long in the ocean, far deeper than any scientist thought possible, but we can also use our breathing to heal ourselves, to heat ourselves up when we're cold, and to do so many other things to really improve our immune health throughout the day. And this is something a lot of people aren't talking about, even though scientists have been studying this for decades and decades.
So obviously, I'm thinking to myself right now, I know sometimes I probably breathe through my mouth. And after reading your book, I'm now a bit concerned by that. And I know that can lead to sort of snoring, sleep apnea, and the dangerous side of it as well. So looking back in terms of the ancient wisdom you looked at there, I know that things like yoga and breathing sessions techniques, we all know these things are good for you. So how did you find that connection between the breathing and the breath and the historical aspects behind it?
So every major culture had studied and appreciated breathing as an essential part of health. If you look at ancient Hindu texts, they're talking all about breathing. Yoga was never about movement. So the first yoga was about sitting, striking a pose, and breathing. So all of these movements came in the last 100 years. So the original yoga is 3,000, 4,000 years old. It's all about breathing. Same thing with ancient Chinese. They used breathing, they studied breathing, they wrote 7 books on breathing. And these books are thousands of years old. So what they all seem to be saying, and what science is showing us now, is that nasal breathing is essential to health. You should not be breathing out of the mouth. And here is why. If you were to take a cross section of my head or your head or anyone's head, it would look something like this. So when we take in breath through the nose, we are pushing that breath through this maze of different structures. And as air is forced through these structures, it is heated, it is moistened, it is pressurized, and all of that air is filtered through all of these different hairs and mucus and so many different things. So by the time it enters our lungs can more efficiently extract oxygen. So this is our first line of defense. If you look at this fellow's mouth, none of those structures exist. Air just goes straight through. So you're exposing yourself to everything in your environment. And if you happen to be in a city like I am, that means pollutants, that means allergens, that means a bunch of other dust and gunk. You want to filter that air. So just breathing through your nose is really the first step to healthy breathing.
So how have we got it so wrong over time? We try and think we're an evolving society, we're a society that's progressive. We think that physically we're getting better at what we're doing. So where do we go so wrong with this sort of process then?
So when I was a kid, which was 1,000,000 years ago, I never learned that evolution wasn't about progress. I had always learned that evolution was Darwinism, survival of the fittest, natural selection. Life just keeps getting better and better and stronger and meaner. That is not true. So any person who has studied evolution, any biologist, any anthropologist will tell you that evolution means change. And life can change for the better or for the worse. And the human species right now, at least as far as our breathing is concerned, has been changing for the worse because our faces have been growing more and more flat, our mouths have been growing more and more small, that it's hard for so many of us just to get a free breath in. And you think about it, you look at any other animal in the wild, they're breathing just fine. But humans, we have sleep apnea, we have snoring, we have asthma, we have respiratory problems that other animals don't have. And if you look at the skeletal record, there's a very good chance our ancestors did not have these problems either because they had these huge nasal apertures. Those are the two holes that connect our noses to our throats. They had these enormous jaws and they had these huge airways. So I don't mean to bum anyone out. The reason why I research this stuff is once you identify the problem, you can then find solutions. You can then fix it. And that's what I spent so many years in laboratories and at universities doing, is finding the best way of fixing our breathing to share in better health.
I think incredibly powerful to hear that sort of story. I guess inherently we know that the ancients and the chanting they used to do as well, and the timing behind that is very, very interesting, and that all interconnects well. I know in going through the book as well, you talk about the muscle associated with the jaws as well, and how that's been affected over time, perhaps by, is it processed food? How can we strengthen that? How can we improve our jaw muscle to actually get back on track with this then?
So everyone wonders, how did we get crooked teeth? If you were to look at an ancient skull, anything older than about 500 years old, and I've looked at hundreds of these, and you can look them up online if you'd like, you're going to see straight teeth. And this includes our ancestors from 1,000,000 years old to 500,000 years old and on up. But right around the time when processed foods started coming all over the world, we all started eating this stuff. And by processed foods, I mean rice where the bran and the germ were removed, so you just had the starchy white seed, flour that was pulverized, a lot of sugary stuff, canned stuff. You think about all of these foods and they're extremely soft. So our ancestors used to chew for 4 hours a day. And if you think about the stuff you've eaten today, at least if you're like me, avocados, smoothies, pancakes, it's all soft. So especially when you're young, it's so important to chew because when we chew, we're able to work the musculature of our faces. We're actually able to build a wider palate, a wider mouth. And chewing really starts in infancy. So we know that kids who are breastfed versus those who are bottle fed, breastfeeding takes a lot of stress. It helps pull the face out. They will have a lower incidence of sleep apnea and snoring later on in life. So especially, it's a little too late for me to start chewing. I'm old, but if you are young, chew your food, eat real foods that require chewing. I know it may take a while, it's not as fun, but you are going to be doing yourself a big favor later on in life.
Great advice, and there are quite a lot of young people around the world right now. So I'm going to go and try and tune in now to a different question for you. This is a very specific question about people facing perhaps times of stress and difficulty and challenges at the same time. I've got somebody online now called Charlotte. I'm going to try and get a camera on now to see you and the microphone unmuted. And we'll say a quick hello, Charlotte. How are you?
Hi.
Hi, Charlotte. I think you got a question for James, is that right?
Yes.
Fire away.
I am in year 11 at Scarisbrick Hall School. I will be taking my GCSEs this year. What do you suggest to help with the stress of the exams?
So this is a very stressful time for everyone, especially for a student about ready to take big exams. So one of the things that happens when we get stressed out is we start breathing inadequately. We tend to open our mouth and so this creates a feedback loop in our body, and our brain reacts to that stress and becomes more stressed the more we start breathing too much. So the very first thing you should do when you feel stress coming on is slow down your breathing. Breathe through the nose. So you can try a little trick right now. You can place your hand over your heart, and we're going to inhale to a count of 4, and we're going to exhale to 6. If you can't exhale that whole time, that's okay. So while you're inhaling, 2, 3, 4, and exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Try it again. Inhale to 4, 2, 3, 4, and exhale to 8. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So you can keep breathing that way. You're going to notice something. Every time you inhale, your heart rate goes up. Every time you exhale, it starts to slow down. So whenever you feel the stress coming on, you can exhale more than you inhale. This is not a placebo effect. This is you taking control of your breathing and sending messages of calm to the brain and the rest of your body to relax. And it's no coincidence that if you start breathing more slowly, exhaling more, you might feel your fingers, a little warmth coming to your fingers or your toes. That's because circulation is increasing to those areas. And if you breathe more slowly as well, you're going to get more oxygen to your brain. I know a lot of you are thinking, well, I want more air, I want more oxygen, so I'm going to breathe more breath. That is not how it works. And this is something that took me a long time to get my head around. The slower you breathe, the more in line with your metabolic needs, the more oxygen you are going to get throughout your body. So before you start in on that exam, before that first big question, you're very nervous, take control of your breathing. If you want to balance your breathing, try about 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out through the nose, and you'll notice there's a good chance you can focus a lot better that way.
Great advice. I think I will practice it myself, I think, before meetings and schedules. I think we should never forget it, certainly. I want to head over to a country now, a beautiful country called Norway. And if you've been there, it's a stunning place to go and visit. And we have a question coming in there, which is about, what should schools really be doing about this? Let's try and connect now to our friends over in Norway, if we can do, and see what their question is.
Hi, I'm Isabel Tomlin, and I go to the British International School Stavanger Gymnasium in Norway. We have a question for James Nestor. Should governments implement breathing exercises into schools that are in areas with low air quality to help improve both their physical and mental well-being? And if so, can you elaborate?
So I think it's a great idea. I'm not in control of any policy around the world, but breathing is something that each of us carry with us all the time. We can breathe 20,000 times a day, even 25,000 times a day. And think about something right now. If you take a breath in through your nose or mouth, this doesn't really matter for this exercise. There are more molecules of air that you just took in that single inhale than all the grains of sand on all the world's beaches. So how you take in that breath and how you exhale it impacts your health in very profound ways. So I think that a wonderful thing for people to do, knowing that breathing is free. It's available to all of us all the time, and doing it has known benefits to your health, mental health, physical health, and more, is you can focus on breathing. And if there were 5 minutes or 10 minutes at the beginning of class, even a couple minutes to focus on your breathing, I think that we would see some pretty good results. And the worst thing that could happen is you might feel better. There are no side effects to breathing healthy. One other thing I want to add, I spent a month in Norway trying to surf your very cold waves and didn't do too well, but a gorgeous country, and I can't wait to go back there sometimes.
James, thank you very much. I think we both love the Norwegian fjords, so that's wonderful to share that. Now, our time is coming to an end for a second in the Global Classroom with you, but your input's been fantastic. Are there any final words you want to share with children around the world at all, James?
I would just say basically a repeat of what I've said during this talk. Try to breathe through your nose as much as you can. Try to breathe slowly, especially in areas with pollution or smoke, and especially at a time of COVID. This is your first line of defense, including against viruses, because our nose produces this other amazing molecule called nitric oxide, which battles viruses. So there is no problem with ever breathing through your nose. There are many problems associated with mouth breathing. So these are simple things. I think if you adopt these as habits, you'll really feel a lot of benefits from them.